My name is Chris Pratt, and I'm the publisher of QC Magazine. I think that you got a blurb on that when you walked into the door. There's been two people in my lifetime that I've been impressed by their courage. One of them is Dennis Marceau. Are you out there, Dennis? There he is. So anyway, Dennis Marceau, for those of you that are my age or older, he goes back to the Vietnam War, where he protested in full military uniform and he paraded in front of the White House and actually was arrested and took on the military. He was scared out of his mind, but he ended up winning. They gave him an honorable discharge, and he won. The other person is Susan, and I'm not going to steal her thunder because she's got a hell of a story to tell you. And I'm glad we had a good turnout to listen to Susan make an important presentation. It's all yours. Thank you.
I want to recommend that all of you guys check out QC Magazine, which is Questions of Conscience, which is raising all sorts of important issues about the political arena today and the kind of foreign policy questions we're facing, or not foreign policy questions, but global issues and the challenges that we're facing. They say, some of you will know that I was a CIA. I am a paradox. I'm like a box of contradictions. I was a peace activist who was a CIA asset. I was beloved by the Iraqi. I know you all hate the CIA. Boo, CIA! I was the back channel, a covert back channel to the Iraqi embassy and the Libyan embassy. And the irony is that they knew, and this is very important that you understand this, from the very first meeting, they knew who I was. And they agreed to, this was not covert on their end. This was not a spy mission where I snuck into their embassy and pretended to be something else so I could build a relationship with them. I blew their mind. I went right in and said, look, I'm an anti-sanctions activist, anti-war activist, and I've been asked if I would be a back channel to your governments because you're both under sanctions, and I'm willing. Was probably pretty naive. I was very young, and I wanted to change the world, and I was convinced that I could do it, and it was harder than I thought. But I told them straight up what I wanted to do, and they had to agree. They wanted to agree, and actually I came to be very close to these people and these diplomats who I saw as people rather than as enemies or opponents or adversaries. I saw them as individuals, and I can tell you that the Iraqis were deeply wounded, traumatized, wanted so much to be your friends. They wanted so much to rebuild their alliances with Washington, and tonight you're going to hear the real story of the tragedy of what happened. You're going to hear subsequently, the thing you need to realize is the reason you don't know this story is that I was subsequently arrested on the Patriot Act. I was the second non-Arab American ever indicted on the Patriot Act after Jose Padilla. And I was held under indictment on secret charges, secret evidence, secret grand jury testimony. I was never allowed to know who had accused me of what crime. I was not allowed to know the nature of the crime. Think about this. You broke the law. Well, what law? Oh, we can't tell you that. That's classified. Oh, well. What was the action? Oh, we can't tell you that either. What day did it occur? We're not going to tell you. You know the answer. You know what you did. I'm like, yeah, I raised hell about this war. I told you not to do it. Sorry, this is being taped for community television, so I'm going to try to restrain from swearing. And if you have to zip it, you can go zip, zip, because sometimes I do that. But Schopenhauer said that all truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is savagely ridiculed. Then it is attacked. And finally, it is perceived as self-evident. Okay? And that's what has happened with me. when I was, just so you know, not right before the war, for 2 years before the war, for all of my life, I've been an anti-war activist. And in the 2 years before the war, I was directly involved with the Iraqi ambassador, Dr. Saeed Hassan, and other top diplomats at the United Nations building a peace framework. You don't even know that even now, I'm sure that all of you consider yourself very knowledgeable individuals, and you are. And yet you don't even know the tip of the iceberg. We could have stopped this whole war and achieved every objective the United States had. The Iraqis had agreed to all of the following, and then I'm going to come back and tie this into 9/11, and whether or not you're 9/11 truthers, I think you'll be horrified, and you'll see 9/11 in a different way. From the start of the Bush administration, there's one more thing I need to tell you, that you need to realize this. This is the 2012 presidential election is the first time that I have not been under indictment since 2004. I was under indictment from March 2004, 6 months before George Bush had his knock-up with John Kerry, and barely won. And I was under indictment in 2008 when Obama and John McCain were at it. And right up until the end, I did spend 1 year in prison on Carswell Air Force Base without a trial, without a hearing. I was not allowed ever to show that I was telling the truth. Meanwhile, while I was locked up in prison, I got the pleasure of watching on prison television while the members of Congress, and mostly the Republicans, but a lot of Democrats too, excoriated me for my incompetence as a CIA asset who'd covered Iraq at the United Nations. They blamed me for the pre-war intelligence. You will all remember this. Probably you blamed me for pre-war intelligence. What the heck were those people doing? Why didn't they try to stop this war? Why didn't they correct the mistakes? How did they ever get the wrong idea that there were weapons of mass destruction inside Iraq? I was indicted. The one thing that we could prove, the one thing that they did admit, was that I had gone to Secretary of State Colin Powell the week before, who lived right next door to my CIA handler, and I went to him a week before his big speech at the United Nations, when he went out there and he had these graphs and he pounded the lectern and said, oh, those Iraqis have all these weapons of mass destruction. I went to him a week before and I said, your information is totally unreliable. Your sources are untrustworthy. We have a peace option that will solve all the problem. You're operating from a position of strength. They had already deployed the soldiers to the Gulf. I said, imagine if instead of going and killing all these young men and women, and murdering all the Iraqis, imagine if you force Saddam, if at this moment you force Saddam to back down and give you everything you want, because that's what's going to happen. They've already agreed to this. They've agreed to it 18 months ago. And we can do this even today. I said, you can claim a total victory without firing a shot. That every single objective you have is already resolved. And I'm going to tell you what those are right now. From the end of the Clinton administration, in November of 2000, when they were counting the ballots in Florida, while they were still trying to figure out who was going to be the next president, who was going to steal was George Bush going to steal the election? We didn't even know. I was up in New York with the Iraq's ambassador, Dr. Saeed Hassan, and I was doing the preliminary talks on resuming the weapons inspections. I did that, and you will remember the inspections went beautifully well. That was not an accident. We went through using conflict, because I'm an anti-war activist and believe in conflict resolution. We went through every possible, conceivable hang-up for the inspections. We looked at all the problems that had gone on before, and we picked them apart and figured out exactly how the Iraqis were going to do it differently this time. And it worked. You don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. You can have a positive solution. And sure enough, they went very well, but as of November, so right off the top, you're not told about this for another 2 years. Okay, you are told, sorry, the talks, sorry, let me give you a timeline. The talks to resume the weapons inspections begin November 2000. You are told in March of 2002, how long is that, 2 years? That March of 2002, 18 months later, that Iraq has finally agreed. No, Washington had finally agreed. The Iraqis said that they would agree to whatever the United States wanted, and the CIA was forced to put them through the paces to prove every conceivable hang-up would be addressed. The other thing that was wrong was involvement with terrorism. In fact, Saddam was one of our best sources of terrorism intelligence throughout the 1990s. First and foremost, believe it or not, I existed to get that intelligence. That was one of the key reasons why Washington decided a back channel would be necessary, because Iraq had possessed the best intelligence. He tracked these people mercilessly, and we recognized the Clinton administration was proactive and really positive, good. This was a smart thing to do, recognizing that these countries that we considered pariahs still possessed specialized knowledge that we would need to get. And so I was designated as the channel to get this. So after the bombing of the USS Cole, which Iraq gave us advance warning about, and we allowed it to happen, ooh, how does that happen? Think about that. We knew about the bombing of the USS Cole 3 weeks before it happened. I personally learned about this from Iraqi diplomats. I went back to Washington. I immediately told my CIA contacts, my defense intelligence contacts, about that there was going to be a bombing in the port of Aden. The night of the USS Cole attack, it turns out that they had pulled all the guards off the ship. All the standard protocols for guarding a USS, the ship, that was all, they were all pulled out. Now, that's an example, it's not a false flag, but it's an example of how the United States frequently uses terrorism for, it's not a question of our ignorance, they're using it for a purpose. They're deliberately allowing something to happen so that they can maneuver through to their own agenda. And in the case of Yemen, they didn't want to set up a military base, but they wanted to force Yemen to cooperate with other terrorism goals. Okay, so a week before the USS Cole attack, I had personally gone back to my friend who was the deputy ambassador of Yemen and told him about the attack. And I was instructed to tell him, that he'd better be thinking about how Yemen could cooperate with the United States. And then they let the attack happen a week later. Okay, so this is not only, that's a context for 9/11 as well. But as a result of that, that may be more information than you need to know. But as a result of that attack, the CIA had instructed me to go in February of 2001, 9 months before 9/11. I was instructed to go back to the Iraqis and tell them that we wanted to send the FBI into Baghdad, and that we wanted to send a terrorism task force with authority to conduct terrorism investigations, interview witnesses outside of the presence of the Mukhabarat, and make arrests as required. Okay? 9 months before 9/11, Iraq agreed. Okay? Imagine if you had had this information, what kind of decisions would Americans have been making regarding congressional elections, presidential elections, if you'd had some basis of facts. So you've got weapons inspections with no conditions. Iraq is agreeing to everything we want. We've got an FBI task force going into Iraq. Another thing was that we had special contracts, priority contracts for American corporations. Before 9/11 ever happens, months before, from November 2000, they were offering us all the oil that we could possibly want. From even before they'd finished counting the ballots in Florida, the Iraqis were already saying you can have special preference on oil contracts. We will buy American oil equipment exclusively. You can rebuild our pipelines. Everything you want, you can have. But then they sweetened it even more. They agreed that Americans would have preferential contracts in telecommunications, meaning internet, phone, satellite, television, everything. And that would have been an opportunity for the West to have inroads into Iraq. Okay. Healthcare, hospital equipment, pharmaceuticals. Those of you who know what Iraqi sanctions had done to the society will remember that Iraq had once performed the second heart transplant in the world, had the finest hospitals before sanctions. We destroyed their hospitals. When I visited Baghdad, I was horrified to see that children were dying without an aspirin. Literally, children were, when going into hospitals, they had no chemotherapy, they had no drugs of any kind. They'd open up the closets, they'd open up the cabinets, and there would be nothing there. People had to travel, families had to travel to Jordan or Turkey to buy medicine off the black market and bring it back. And they would buy black market medicines, bringing it in, and then the hospitals would administer it. But if you didn't have the money for the travel to Turkey, you were out of luck. You weren't going to get anything. So the United States had done this. We were going to have, again, preferential contracts. All this stuff was going to happen. This was a peace, there was a good peace, and pretty much everything the CIA could try to get, they were getting. The final plank in this was democracy. Iraq itself came up with a tremendous initiative. A year before the invasion, I was in Baghdad. I was having lunch at the Iraqi Hunting Club, which was a spy club in Baghdad for the Mukhabarat. And I was having lunch with one of Saddam's revolutionary councils. He was just executed in Baghdad, and he was the gentleman who used to hand Saddam papers to sign, and he would stand right behind Saddam and put things in front of him for his signature and get him whatever he was looking for. Very close. And he said to me, and when I heard this, I was just blown away. I thought that Saddam was dying, because he said to me that they had an idea. Would we like democracy? Sure. That they would invite the Iraqi exiles to return to Baghdad and live in expanded embassy compounds protected by embassy security. And those of you who are international travelers know that embassies are sovereign territory of their home country. So they were going to repatriate these people, have them live in the embassies. They would be protected to travel around the country. They would have the rights to have opposition party headquarters, opposition party newspapers, campaign activities. And Iraq offered to allow elections to occur within 18 months that would be supervised by Jimmy Carter. They said, we'll invite Jimmy Carter. Can you tell Jimmy Carter for us that we want him to come monitor our elections? Now, do any of you really believe that Jimmy Carter would throw an election to help Saddam Hussein? No. No. You could have had everything you want. You didn't have to kill a single person. Not one human being had to die. And it would have been better than what you were only asking for weapons inspections. And that was a done deal. That was easy. It was the corporate media that lied to you. The corporate media that did not want to tell you anything. They did not want to tell you the facts. They wanted to. They tried to. When I tried to tell you the facts, they turned around and just tried to attack and destroy my reputation, because they didn't want you to listen to this message that you don't have. War is not. Not only is war not the answer, it's not even inevitable. There's no reason for you to pursue the policies you're pursuing. You can have everything you want with peace and have money. It would have been an economic peace bonanza of jobs and revenue for corporations, and shareholders would have profited. Wall Street would have gone nuts. The United States was, and you can hate, and I know you guys hate the CIA. I know you hate the CIA. It's okay. But the CIA was doing what it's supposed to do in a proactive way, getting as much for American society, much for American corporations as they could get away with. And in this case, the Iraqis were giving it. They're like, anything you want, because they wanted to get rid of the sanctions. They did. And, you know, it's worth thinking about this, because the reason this is still important today is because we're now facing war with Iran. And we are under the wrongful assumption that diplomacy is a waste of time. Diplomacy cannot solve our problems. Oh, we're trapped in this. There's only war is the only option. And we're allowing ourselves to be driven down this road like cattle. And in fact, it's a choice that our society has to make. And we have options. And there is never, I can tell you, I swear to you, there is never a time that diplomacy cannot achieve results. Okay, let's look at Iran. What about green energy? Nobody even talks about this. Right now, Iran is in a rush for nuclear energy to supply its cities. What if some great people from Vermont, you can get involved? Why does it have to be the CIA who only does it? You guys can get involved. Take some project people, some engineers over to and make a visit and tell these guys, look, here's how green energy works. Here's wind power. Here's solar power. And why do you want to be in the nuclear club anyway? That's so 1970s. That's old. That's old. It's failed. Look at Fukushima. I've got some great friends in Japan who I'm hoping are going to actually do this. That we should have a peace contingent go with them from America to say that we are against the war. We can do something about this. But you see, when you start taking the pressure off, if you start creating alternatives, you can channel your energy, channel your negativity, channel your fear into positive problem solving, and pretty soon you have a totally different equation than you've just messed up their war equation. We don't have to do what they say. I'll tell you something else. Right now, I'm going to give you I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. We are about to get back. You know how Obama's been promising? I don't know if you all support Obama or not. Hopefully you support the middle class. We are about to get back the money that was stolen from the Pentagon during the $2.3 trillion.
Surprise.
There was surprise. No, we've been trying to get this back, and I personally am involved in this. We're going to get back $9.3 trillion to $11 trillion. And I'm involved in it, so I can tell you this. That's a fact. Those are numbers that I know because I'm involved in it. I'm involved with doing this, and part of it. And we could have done this back in July. I was ready to do this in June. But June would have been the early. Got involved in February. We could have done this by about June, for the beginning of July. The neocons have been blocking everything. They've been throwing up every obstacle to stop it from happening. I see his hand coming up.
Where are you going to get the money back from?
It has been in a bank making interest. And imagine if you don't spend money. If you put $2.3 trillion in a bank, and I can't tell you I know which bank it is, but I can't tell you. There are some things I'm not allowed to tell you. But if you put $2.3 trillion in a bank for 13 years, it's been there since about 1998, 1999, and pretty soon you got about $10 trillion. And that's what we're going to have.
Whose money was it?
It was money on 9/11, on September 10th. Donald Rumsfeld held a press conference stating that $2.3 trillion had been stolen from the Pentagon budget.
Unaccounted for. Just unaccounted for.
Unaccounted for. Yeah, okay, it was unaccounted for, yeah. Oops, that's a lot of money to misplace. Okay, and we know where it is, and we're getting it back, and it's going to be at least 9.3 trillion, possibly up to $10 trillion, but at least 9.3 trillion. And this is what happened. You see, it's not over. This country isn't over. We're not done yet. But here's the problem. What are they going to do with the money? That may be the bigger problem. Getting it back may be the easy part. Deciding how they're going to spend it. And that's one of the reasons that I know you guys are a lot of anti-war people here. And when this happens, you guys need to be ready to jump up, and it's going to happen very soon. The neocons have been truly, it wouldn't be an October surprise except that the neocons have been blocking us for months. And they may block it before November. They may succeed, but we're ready, on our side, we're ready to move as fast as possible to get it back to you. And if it's weak, it should be able to be delivered to you within like 2 weeks, but with the elections and everything like that, it may be 6 weeks. It's coming by the end of the year. You're not going to see your taxes go up. You're not going to see huge cuts. But the reason I'm telling you right now is that what would be the worst case they do? What if the Pentagon takes the money and hides it from you and says, oh, now we're going to have a war with Iran. How are you going to pay for the war with Iran? Oh, well, we'll find it somewhere. And the reason I'm coming and I'm outing it right now is I want to kind of force these guys. All of us together have got to do this. Force these guys to use it for for cutting, for deficit cutting. We can't let them make it. We've got to learn from the mistakes we've made, and we've got to rebuild our infrastructure. We've got to cut the deficit, and it is going to happen. It is happening. It's already happening. I see this gentleman again.
Are you sure the term
I'm sure of the numbers. I'm sure of the years.
30
Trillion.
$30 trillion was around 12 years ago?
No. Sorry. No. I said 9.3 trillion, up to 10 trillion.
All right.
Yes.
But was the term $1 trillion with a
T?
Was he using it 12 years ago?
It was black budget.
I don't think so.
It was black budget.
I think that term is about 5 years old.
No. The money was on September 10th, the day before 9/11. Donald Rumsfeld announced that they had kind of lost it or misplaced it, and the next day, when the Pentagon accidentally got bombed, or a missile accidentally hit it, it struck the accounting office where the records for the missing $2.3 trillion were kept. Yeah, so that goes back years, and that's one of the reasons why they invited me to get involved with it, because I would know the history of the money. But it is 2.3, and it's going to come back 9.3 up to 10, and it could be a little bit more than that, but that's what we're looking at, and we're going to have it. But again, the choices that we make as a society, we're not helpless. What I see us doing is handing over our power. The reason I'm saying this to you is not just for the salacious value of telling you we're going to cut the deficit in half. We have to stand up and we've got to stop giving away our power to the military-industrial complex. We have to insist that the highest priority of the American people is to rebuild the infrastructure of our society, cut the deficit for our children, and invest in our own people. If you're gonna go into, we've already gone into these wars where we can't even pay the soldiers. They're coming back severely damaged. We don't even have money for hospital care for these people, and these soldiers have survived traumatic injuries that in Vietnam would have killed them. Or World War II, they'd be dead. Korea, they'd be dead, but they've lost, they're triple amputees at this stage, double amputees, triple amputees, and we don't have anything for them, but we have money for Lockheed Martin, and that's got to stop.
I'm sorry. I've read the Michael Collins articles about you, and I've read quite a bit of your book, but I don't understand how, after you've been so badly treated by the establishment, how you're now back on the inside track with this stuff again.
No.
Who are you working with? What's going on?
This is somebody who is also on the outs with the CIA. And I can't tell, I'm not allowed to tell you who it is, but he is somebody who's severely on the outs like I was.
So
he's been in real trouble too, and so they've always known where it was, and it's a question of getting it back.
Okay, so you're part of the real good CIA.
Well, I don't think there is a good CIA. I'm part of the outed CIA that's trying to fix a mess.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and I'm trying to help fix a mess that if we don't fix it, we're going to, but there's no good CIA. This is not a question of good CIA, bad CIA. This is like saving America. This is like good America, bad America. So, but I also want to tell you. But the reason that this is important is because if you know the options for peace, we can make. We're not. It's just important to know that diplomacy can achieve the results we're looking for. We're not hopeless. We've got to stop handing our power away. We've got to stop giving it to the military-industrial complex. We've got to stop thinking that they're going to dictate for us and we're going to take it. We don't have to take it. We don't have to take it at all. There's, if 15% of Americans stand up and say there's not going to be war with Iran, we're not going to back down, and we're not going to go away, we're not going to stay silent, then we're going to make this happen. We can do this. It is not, it's not inevitable that we have to go into a World War III situation. I hear a lot of people, as I'm going around and doing a lot of radio shows, people say, but it's a foregone conclusion. It's hopeless. We should just give up. And I'm like, no, this is the moment when you have to not give up. This is the moment where you have to say that our voice counts as well. So that's what I want to say to you.
Our voice as protesters, as what?
Our voice as Americans, as protesters, as Americans,
They
as
don't listen to the protests.
well.
We can't vote because our votes aren't counted in public.
Our
They're secret counts.
Yeah, well, but we can't. I guess I disagree in the sense that I know they're paying a lot. That they do pay attention. I know that because I paid a price for that attention. I was amazed to find out that and it's very intimidating. They know how to get you. I was indicted on the Patriot Act to shut me up about Iraq and to shut me up about 9/11. The way that they got around, and this is the other thing that you have to know. It's like now that I've tried to encourage you, I'm going to tell you the bad side of it. They know how to pull our buttons, to push our buttons, and there is grave danger right now, whether you believe that 9/11 was an inside job, whether you believe the official story or not. There is a grave danger they're going to use false flag operations to try to persuade the American people, the majority, the sheeple, who are not attentive, who really don't know what's going on, who don't know history, who feel helpless, and they're going to try to persuade those people that war is the tragic outcome of the events. And so you have these false flag operations like the Gulf of Tonkin. Remember that? There was no episode. That was a fabrication. So hold on to your political wallets. Don't believe what they're going to tell you because they're going to try to drive you into something. But I still believe, I truly believe, that if 15% of the American people stand up and fight back, we can do this. We really can. And people like you matter a lot. You count for 100 other Americans. You really do. Because it's like the vast majority of the Americans are asleep at the wheel. They're not even paying. They don't know what to do. They're not educated. They're not trying. They're not going to make any effort. But I want to show you how 9/11. In the last few minutes of this, I want to show you how 9/11 was used to overcome the peace that we were building, the peace option that we were building in Iraq. Because even though you were kept ignorant of the peace option, the CIA was very much aware of it. And the CIA was driving the hardest bargain they could get from Saddam Hussein. Everything we were asking for, we were getting. So in April, so the bad guys, the warmongers, the war cabal, the neocons, had to do something that would throw the energy, that would throw Americans into this spasm of hysterical fear and anger, and we would strike out indiscriminately at Arabs. And Iraq might as well be, Al-Qaeda. And even though there was no rationale for it, Saddam Hussein hated these jihadis as much as Dick Cheney. He was as bad on them as Guantanamo. Okay, you know, he really was. He was obsessive in tracking them, hunting them, throwing them in prison. Yes, he was. In April of 2001, I received a phone call from my CIA handler telling me that I needed to come to his office because he had a message to deliver to the diplomats in New York, the Iraqi diplomats in New York. And he wanted me to take this message to them as quickly as possible. And for those of you who don't know my book, please bear, those of you who do know my book, please bear with me while I tell this story. In April of 2001, I was told to tell the Iraqi diplomats that the United States was expecting, that the United States was demanding that Iraq must turn over any intelligence regarding an airplane hijacking conspiracy and a strike on the World Trade Center. And that we were demanding that Iraq must turn over this intelligence to us, and if they failed to do so and it was discovered that they had possessed this intelligence, then we would go to war with them. We would strike Iraq harder than they'd ever been hit before. And I went up to the diplomats and I said, they'd always been friendly. I've got to tell you, they were always friendly with us. And so I went up to New York and I said, hey, could you send a cable to Baghdad? We're looking for intelligence on airplane hijackings. Let us know if you get anything. And I went back to my CIA handler, and he said, so what did you do what did the Iraqis say when you threatened them? I said, well, I didn't threaten them. I didn't need to. They've been a great source for us. I'm sure they'll give it to us if they've got it. And he said, I didn't tell you to be nice to those blankety, blankety, blanketies. And he screamed and shouted and circled me, yelling. It was the only time he ever raised his voice to me. He said, I want you to go back, and I want you to deliver this message exactly as I told you to deliver it the first time. Tell them this threat originates from the highest levels of government above the CIA director and above the Secretary of State. Now, that's only 3 people. The President of the United States, George Bush, the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, and the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. And he said, I want you to tell them that from the highest levels of government, they are threatening war. They're going to bomb Baghdad harder than they've ever been bombed before, back into the Stone Age, if they don't give us any intelligence about this airplane hijacking conspiracy. Now, for those of you who know Richard Gage and Architects for Truth in 9/11, you know that there was nanothermite involved. You know, it's a little bit more complicated than this. What 9/11 was, let me just cut to the chase, was a cover and deception operation. They used the airplane hijacking conspiracy. There may have been, out of the 20 hijackers, there may have been 3 or 4 who were, quote, authentic, who were like misguided. Like you see right now, you know, the FBI has run, since 9/11, 600 operations where they have snagged guys off the internet who were like kind of weak-minded, and they've trapped them into, they've provided financial assistance, and they've gone out and said, oh, these guys are going to blow up something. But really, they were recruited by the FBI, they were trained by the FBI, they were financed by the FBI. Then the FBI jumps on them and says, oh, we averted this threat. And there never was a threat except what was created by the FBI. It's entirely possible that 9/11 was exactly like that. Okay? 20 alleged hijackers, 15 of them being CIA assets. We know that Mohammed Atta and his crew were all working for the CIA. Okay, that is a fact. These were not jihadis. I've known real, true, honest jihadis. They are deeply religious, devout people. They pray 5 times a day. They look at the act of suicide attacks as a self-immolation, a surrender of their entire being to the essence of God. That can be entirely misguided, but that's how they think of themselves. They are not at strip clubs. They're not doing cocaine. They're not with prostitutes. They're not drinking heavily for weeks beforehand. Mohammed Atta was a CIA asset. There were people around him who were living on, who were receiving military pensions, for example. They were getting government money. So if you don't believe in the hijacking story, that's okay, because it doesn't make sense. There's nothing about the official story that makes sense. But we knew, but here's what is important, is that every police officer will tell you that a crime requires motive and opportunity. And in fact, we had at least 6 months advance knowledge. I learned about it from the CIA, from my own CIA handler. Throughout the summer of 2001, we talked about 9/11 constantly, all the time. And it was always very clear what they were expecting to happen. The modus operandi was very well defined. The target was very well defined. And I was pushed over and over again to pump my Iraqi sources for any fragment of intelligence, because it would, and I would go to them and I'd say in June and July and August, look, please give me anything you've got, even the tiniest scrap, because we've got this peace option on the table, and if this darn bombing happens, it's going to ruin the peace option. And the Iraqis knew that. And if they had had anything at all, there's no way they would have withheld it. They were about to achieve everything they possibly wanted, which was to get the sanctions off. And this was just ridiculous. After 9/11, they tried to give us financial documents on al-Qaeda figures. We refused to take it. Uh-oh. Now Iraq's going to cooperate by telling us where the money is, where all the terrorists are keeping their money. These banking records. Wouldn't take them. We wouldn't take it at all. In August of 2001, and I'll just tell you this quickly, and then I'll let you ask questions. In August of 2001, on the day, August 2nd, was the day of Robert Mueller's Senate nomination hearings to head the FBI. And I had a very interesting conversation with my CIA handler. I said, you know, there's never been a terrorism investigation this man didn't throw. He's going to, when this 9/11 attack happens, he's going to be the worst guy. He's going to throw this investigation just like he's thrown all the others. And we had a long conversation about how untrustworthy Robert Mueller was going to be during the 9/11 investigation. And Richard said, what if there is no FBI director when it happens? And I said, you mean you think it's imminent? He said, oh, yes. Oh, yeah, the attack is imminent. We expect it any time now. This is August 2nd. And I said, well, I'll go up to New York and talk to my Iraqi sources, see if they've got anything from Baghdad. And he said, oh, no, it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. I don't want you going back to New York until after the attack is over. We're expecting mass casualties. We always expected the towers to come down. We always expected that the quote, hijacking shenanigan conspiracy would be tied to explosives. We discussed a miniature thermonuclear device. But I want to say Richard Gage has the best information on this. They've actually studied the type of bombs that were used. And so the fact that they were prepping us in advance to expect it to fall, to expect that both of them were to be used, doesn't mean that the story went down exactly the way the CIA said. It's a cover and deception operation, after all. So, but it was supposed to be like a big, we were expecting a major attack. Thousands dead, just like exactly as it happened. And so on August 6th, I came back to his office. August 4th was a Saturday. I went up to the Iraqis. August 6th, I came back to his office. And while George Bush was, on August 6th was a big day because apparently Richard Clark gave him, President Bush, a presidential briefing memo outlining the al-Qaeda threat. And that was the day that George Bush said, oh, well, bet you're glad you got this out of the way. Let's go shoot some golf balls. I mean, and this was, you know, and a month later, 9/11 happens. And so but I didn't know that. Richard, my CIA handler, didn't know that. So subsequently, I was asked to telephone the office of Attorney General John Ashcroft. And I did so. Monday was on August 6th. I did so by August 8th. And I personally telephoned Attorney General John Ashcroft's private staff. Because of my long involvement in anti-terrorism, I had his private phone number for his internal staff office. This was not like the 800 number you see on the highway or the general public number. This was a special number for anything that we discovered that if we couldn't reach the people at the CIA, we could turn on the FBI. And it was supposed to kick in a response. And so I called and I asked for what we call an emergency broadcast alert through all federal agencies for any fragment of intelligence on airplane hijackings with a known target of the World Trade Center and a possible miniature thermonuclear device to be used imminently. We expected mass casualties, and we needed this to be a priority response from any agency that would be responding to all. So the staff of John Ashcroft gave me the number of a phone number at the Office of Counterterrorism. They told me to repeat the message to them. I did so, and I'm told that John Ashcroft responded, "Oh, those CIA people, they keep talking about this attack. Just forget about it, man. You know, this is really, those dumb CIA people." And I removed their deniability. And this would become a major issue because when George Bush decided to lie to you and reinvent the whole story about 9/11 and the whole truth about Iraqi pre-war intelligence, they decided they'd blame me. And I don't mean like blame the CIA over there. I mean, you were when every time they opened their mouths and they said those darn assets got their facts wrong, why didn't they do something to stop the war? Why didn't they figure out how to stop 9/11? I was the one designated to do it. I was it. And I had done, we had a peace option, we had the warnings for 9/11, we had the 9/11 investigation, we got you financial records, and over and over and over again, the government refused to take action. They actively collaborated in preparing the attack. By shutting down the normal responses that would have stopped it. And in intelligence, you're responsible for what you know. If I discover something, I can't just sit on it. I am responsible for doing something about it. And I'm extremely proactive, and I'm anti-war. Throughout the run-up to the Iraqi war, I actually created a database an email database. Every chief of staff, every legislative director, every press secretary, and every foreign policy assistant. And I pounded these guys with papers that I wrote, papers that you activists wrote, papers that foreign policy experts wrote, telling them this war was going to be catastrophic. And even going to Colin Powell's private residence, because he lived right next door to my CIA handler, and we even have them in a copy, the FBI, thanks to my indictment, the FBI had the manila envelope to Colin Powell's house on Ballantree Drive. And showing that I had gone there, and it was dated, and it was signed by the FBI, the Secret Service who got it, showing that it had been delivered. And these politicians are using national security for their own protection. It's really whenever you hear national security, you need to think congressional security, White House security, because this doesn't have anything to do with what's good for the community. It has nothing to do with protecting you. It is about protecting the job of some congressional staffer who doesn't want to get fired tomorrow. He doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions. He doesn't want his boss to lose the election. And what's happened is the Patriot Act, and this is something you need to also be very concerned about. The Patriot Act has expanded the definition of sedition to include, it's beyond terrorism. It's about disrupting. If you are an effective activist who is challenging and disrupting the order of things and the decision-making process, if you're making a difference and if you're succeeding to the point where these guys, all they have to do is lose their job, and then you are the threat that must be removed because it is their God-given right to rule over America. Who are you to tell them that they have to be responsible to the people? That's what it's about. Be afraid. You're not nearly as afraid as you should be about the Patriot Act. Because I was the second non-Arab American, but many, many more are going to follow. And I remember when I was under indictment and they kept saying my judge was Michael Mukasey, who was also hearing Larry Silverstein's insurance claims on 9/11. And I would go into court, his attorneys would be coming in, and we'd be passing in the hallways. And I'd be like, and I'd be in shackles, because I was locked up in prison for a year. And I'd be in shackles, in tears, begging for a hearing. And I'd go into court, and I would just say, Your Honor, please, we knew about 9/11. Please let my witnesses come into court. Please, I beg you for a hearing. Just, you don't have to take my word for anything. Just let me call my witnesses, and they'll tell you themselves. You can ask them any question you want. Just go right ahead. Just do it. Please, this is the law. What is going on? You don't have the right to stop me from having a hearing. Even, and they're like, you're under the Patriot Act. You're under the Patriot Act. No, we don't want a hearing. She's delusional. She's making this up. Well, sure enough, a year and a half after my release from prison, I had a new attorney, a very high-power Washington attorney named Brian Shaughnessy, who was a former federal prosecutor in the court of Judge John Sirica, a real high flyer, had the capability to strike down the Patriot Act itself. He was really that good. It was worth going to trial because he could defend it and defend me and attack it at the same time. He would have been, the whole country would have been safer if we'd had a trial, because we would have knocked out big pieces of the Patriot. Even if I lost and went to prison for a couple of years, because I did take a trip to Baghdad, though they knew I was going to Baghdad, but I did take it. We could have knocked out enough parts of the Patriot Act that it would have been good for the rest of the country. And that's what we were thinking. But they would not tell him what I was accused of doing. They wouldn't give him the evidence. They wouldn't let him see the grand jury statements. They wouldn't let him see the FBI interviews of the witnesses. And a year and a half after my release from prison, we finally forced the Justice Department, the courts, to grant my natural right to a hearing. By this point, I'd been under indictment for almost 4.5 years. And sure enough, I was allowed 2 witnesses. One was a former congressional chief of staff. One was a university professor. The first confirmed that absolutely I was an asset. Absolutely, she knew my defense intelligence handler for 20 years. There was no question in her mind he was intelligence. There was no question in her mind that he had a relationship with me. He talked about me all the time. She knew that the information that he had told her the same things that I told her, and so she knew that there was corroboration on both sides of this stuff. And then my second witness confirmed the 9/11 warnings. And he said that throughout the spring and summer of 2001, I told him several times about the 9/11 attack, and I told him it would happen at the end of the summer, early fall. And in August, I said it was imminent, that I said it would complete the cycle of the 1993 World Trade Center attack. And he said that he told the FBI about this before the 9/11 Commission ever released its report. The New York Times responded to all of this by writing a horrifying, we thought we'd won. We thought when this testimony came out, we thought they'd won. And the New York Times wrote a hideous story saying that, quote, she stuck her tongue out at the prosecutor. And then writing this lengthy article about how I was supposed to be this religious maniac who suffered non-stop hallucinations, and I was seeing religious figures and imagery and stuff, and don't listen to Susan Lindauer because she's got this nutty, weird, I do believe in God. I realize that there are atheists here. I don't care. I really don't care. I have God, and I'm not a religion. I'm no Sarah Palin. I'm no Rick Perry, that's for sure. But I do happen to believe in a greater force of the universe, which is actually very peaceful and loving in my perspective, and it's not something I worry about. But they portrayed me as this religious nutcase, this crazy woman. And so they said, don't listen to what she has to say. Didn't even mention the 9/11 warnings. And thank heavens there was a blog journalist by the name of Michael Collins, who was there for the whole, and this is the changing of the guard, away from the media, the corporate media, away from the New York Times, into the internet media, the blog media. And he wrote a great story which appeared in Scoop Independent News and then went all over the blogs, Op-Ed News, American Political Journal, all through Smirking Chimp, and he wrote like 400 blogs. And he put this word out that the 9/11 story, we warned about, that there was witness testifying that I gave predictions about 9/11 in very precise detail, who said that there was nothing wrong with me, I'm not mentally unstable, nothing at all. And it just raises questions as to who you can trust. But also, again, it's like we're in flux right now. You cannot trust the corporate media, but you can trust the internet, because on the internet you already know you can get primary documents right off the internet. You can see it for yourself and examine it for yourself. There's more burden of responsibility on us to do the digging ourselves, but we're going to find the answers we want. And if we're looking for peace, we can find it, we can build it, we can demand it, we can insist on this thing, and it's not hopeless. It really isn't. We are not inevitably going to destroy this planet, but it's going to depend on us to stand up and say that we demand to save it. So, thank you. I'm happy to take questions. And if you could just, if anybody who wants to ask a question, if you could, I think they can hear you better if you say it from there. Thanks.
Thank you for a most interesting presentation. Early on, you mentioned being an asset several times. In the jargon of intelligence, there's other words for asset. One is source and one is agent. And there are several categories of agents. For instance, there's an access agent, a support agent, a covert action agent, a transplant agent, a courier.
Boy, you do know a lot about the CIA.
A principal agent, a penetration agent who's a mole of another intelligence organization, and then there's the agent of influence. And there is a double agent. There is no such thing as a triple agent, by the way. And the one I think you were describing is a positive intelligence source. You were collecting intelligence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was
However,
collecting intelligence. I was also a principal access. I would cross over several of those categories.
But
because at the time, there was no, the State Department had no foreign policy, foreign contacts with these foreign diplomatic contacts. So I was a back channel, I was a source, I was a principal agent. They only had, George Tenet.
Principal agent means you had sub-agents.
Oh, well, yeah, no. But they didn't have, let me just tell you, to give you a sense of perspective, George Tenet said that inside Iraq, he could count on one hand the number of agents that he had in the whole country, on one hand. And I was at the United Nations, and there were 3 of us, and the other 2 did not start until after 9/11. So there was a huge burden put on me. There was a huge expectations on me from I was scrutinized by both the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agencies. And I was heavily supervised.
I'd like to make 2 more points. The agency does not make policy. The agency is part of the executive branch of government, and
Sure.
they take direction and requirements from the White House. That's who makes decisions, not the agency, believe me. Also, the meetings you had with what sounds like diplomats were meetings between diplomats, not covert source.
No, yes,
That's
yes.
what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's true.
Could you tell me what the point of all this is?
Yeah, that's true. I was dealing with the ambassador. I was dealing with the senior diplomats, but everything that I was doing was being reported back to the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, and it was not covert on their end in the sense that they knew from day one who I was and what I was doing. At first they were a little bit mystified by it because they respected that everybody understood that I deeply opposed the sanctions and I wanted to try to make things better. I was somewhat naive, and you could definitely say that. I certainly had a sense that I didn't really understand that. I was so young at the time that I didn't really understand that most exercises like this end in failure, or they're supposed to fail. I was too young and naive to know that I wasn't supposed to succeed, so I went out and did succeed. And we got everything that you wanted, we got. And there was a direct line from the CIA to me, and you're wrong about the last part, which is that it's White House policy, because in fact there are factions of intelligence, and there always this tension and working like this, right? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And right now, for example, the war with Iran, yes, there is. There may be a policy initiative, but you're going to have factions competing, and it's not a monolithic situation. It really isn't. And if you know that the White House is like, you have a dumb, stupid president like George Bush, really idiotic, dangerous, then you in the CIA have to make good decisions. You have to create good options that are going to save the situation. When the politicians are too stupid to get it right, we have to fix it. And that's what we often have to do. Even if they're idiots, we have to make them look better than they are. Ha ha on us. But there's always this tension. There is, and it's not uncommon to have it, unfortunately. But you can say that they're supposed. Theoretically, nominally, the White House makes the policy, but in fact, it's a creation of opportunities. And before 9/11, George Tenet has published a book saying that he gave 105 debriefings about 9/11 to the White House, and they did not respond at all, and that there was even the New York Times had some weird article on this last 9/11 anniversary saying that there was questions about whether they were trying to blame Saddam Hussein and the foolishness of this, and then I don't ever read the New York Times anymore, but I'm told that that's what they did, that they tried to say that the CIA was trying to debunk the 9/11, debunk Iraq's involvement with 9/11 in June and July before the attack, and that was certainly true. That part of it was true. Anyway, sorry, sir. Sorry, I didn't do that.
So thank you very much, Susan. And when you exhorted us to work as protesters, I was just going to ask your friend, because I think we could maybe lay out something tonight that's a little more organized around the protest idea of.
Please.
But I think the best thing you can
Please.
do is if you could utilize WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks, I'll tell you something about, you want to know how valuable WikiLeaks is. I grieve for Bradley Manning. He's like a little brother to me. He's like 22, he was 22 or 23 when he went into this situation. For 900 days, he's been held without a trial. He has been subjected to solitary confinement for most of this time. In a lot of cases, for months, he was kept in his underwear under suicide watch. And having been in Carswell Prison, let me tell you what a suicide watch is, because it's really awful. You don't even think about this. What they do is they keep the lights on, you're kept naked, you're forced to face, there is someone watching you. They're either inside the room with you or they're staring through a glass in the window. So sometimes it's either way. and every 15 minutes, you're forced to face them at all times. You're not allowed to turn your back to them, like turn your back so you can face the wall and have some privacy. They have to be able to see your face. You're not allowed to cover your head with a blanket, just like to have some privacy, or to have just cover your eyes because the lights are on. And every 15 minutes, they ask you, "Are you alive?" And you have to say yes. You have to answer them. You have to physically respond. And if you're exhausted, if you're conked out snoring, they will, and you don't respond, they'll shake you and wake you up so that you have to answer them. "Hey, wake up! Are you alive?" Well, you can hear me snoring, so probably yes. But they do this, and this goes on for weeks and months. And they did this. It's torture. It will produce a psychotic reaction in somebody. It's severe sleep deprivation. And you're already scared enough because you're in prison and you're being badly treated. So it's just, you don't know your future's on hold, and it's terrible. But you were asking about WikiLeaks and Bradley Manning, and as far as his contribution. Bradley Manning, as you know, well, you all know what Bradley Manning did. We have to protect people. This is a little bit self-serving because it's me, because I lived through this. But we as a society, you need people to be willing to talk, because democracy can only work really if we have a knowledgeable public. And you can't make good decisions if you're kept in ignorance of what's really happening, and you don't even know where the blowback's coming from if you don't know, if you're being deprived of information. And so, in my opinion, whistleblowers are really necessary. We've got to be able to tell you, and we've got to know you're going to back us up. The hardest part for me was when the corporate media blacked out my story. And they refused to cover it because they were going to be good Americans. They were not going to tell you because George Bush didn't want them to. And so they were going to do what the government said, and they were going to show they were loyal to the people. Were you better off because you were kept in ignorance and you couldn't make a decision about the type of leadership you wanted for this country? Was America, this is I know a lot of you are Democrats, liberal, very progressive or independent, but think of the rest of America, which does not have all of your information and all of your education and your knowledge of history. The whole country would have been dramatically changed if you'd had access to the facts. WikiLeaks, Bradley Manning did not provide material, was not aiding and abetting the Iraqi people. They already knew what was happening in their country. They're living through it. We were the ones who've been kept in ignorance of the blowback that our actions and our military strategy was causing in that region. And by educating us, he helped us take responsibility back and take our power back. And that's what you've got to do. And so you have a government that's in fear, and it's very mediocre, very stupid, really poor quality leadership right now. And they're using national security for patriotism and flag waving and trying to get everybody excited and rallying around themselves. And you're totally misguided in what you're doing. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I didn't raise the name of Bradley Manning, but I was thinking that maybe there was a way that we could draw some attention to that. I mean, it needs to come to light. We know he's in an undisclosed location, but it's not right. It's not justice. And
he's been at Leavenworth.
No, I was being facetious, but the president made the claims that he would end Guantanamo, and he didn't do that. So I don't imagine that that man that was at the podium for the debate has much to do with this. But I would like to know, when you talk about
you mean Obama,
this money,
the Obama character who the stick figure who showed up at the debates, yeah.
So, but if it's not Julian Assange that you're in cahoots with, which is, I guess, what I was hoping, that WikiLeaks could broadcast this information in order to rally public support all around the world. But
I think they're trying to.
okay,
I think that the real problem is that the corporate media is silencing it as much as they can. There are websites supporting Bradley Manning, but the corporate media in Washington, at least, does not acknowledge it.
well, they're two different universes, so that's
Yeah.
why I'm saying WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
I think Assange is a very heroic figure. Anyway,
Yes.
with the money that you're speaking of, which I still can't wrap my head around, but I'm wondering, maybe you could say a little bit more about neocons blocking this. Is there any way that what could come to light would
Are
lead
we
to the-
neocons? Is Obama now a neocon?
But
Now, see, this is a very, sorry, go on.
I
Sorry.
just want to ask you, can we indict Cheney?
Please do so. Yes, yes, yes.
He can't leave the country.
He's under indictment all over the world except here. You
But
know?
he can't step foot in Brattleboro.
He can't, yay! He's afraid to go to Canada. Tony Blair and George Bush are afraid to go to Canada. They've been canceling meetings over there. Seriously. They've been invited to go to Europe and different places in Europe. They won't go. They pretty much can't leave the country. But we have to make it hard for them here too. And the problem is, and I would love to see them indicted. In fact, I'd love to testify if they were indicted, because this shows maliciousness towards the American people, malicious deceit. This is not incompetence. This is not it's treason. It is an active decision to murder Americans in Iraq, or American soldiers in Iraq. It is an active decision to commit war crimes in Iraq with no provocation. It's an active decision to kill Americans in 9/11. And there's a whole number of reasons why. And the tragedy is that instead of that, we're likely to have more false flag operations like 9/11 that are going to draw us into new wars, and we're going to have our Democratic president if he wins re-election, he may very well take us into another war. And we've got to find a way to stop these people from doing these things. And we've got to let them know that we're not stupid, we're not fooled, and that's why 9/11 is still important. I realize that a lot of people, even in this room, are tired of 9/11. You're like, oh, please. But if you don't learn from history, you're going to if we the people, not you, if we the people don't learn our history, our own history, we are much more easy to manipulate. They can use the same strategies and tactics all over again, and that is exactly what they're going to do. We've got 3 carrier groups in the Straits of Hormuz, and there are German manufactured submarines that are owned by Israel that are also in the Straits of Hormuz. And there's some and I don't want to get into a fight with you about over Israel. I know a lot of you guys love Israel. But Israel has an agenda that is not in line with the United States. They need America to go to war for them, to fight for them. And whether you like Israel or not, this is not about being anti-Jewish. It is not about being anti. You don't have to be anti-Israel, but you just have to draw the line and say that America's interests are not the same as Israel's interests. Our taxpayers cannot pay for this. Our soldiers cannot shed any more blood for this. These wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were done for the Israeli cause, not for ours. And we all know it. And yet it's considered somewhat, anti-Semitic to say it. At least in Washington, it's dangerous to say. AIPAC is so powerful.
Do you have any sense who shelled Turkey this week?
Who shelled Turkey this week? Was it
Syria.
really Syria? Was it the Syrian liberation, the free Syria Liberation Army that did it? Yes, I would say that it's more like, I would say that the idea that the Syrian government, that the official Syrian government did it, would be absolutely garbage, because they would know better than to do that. They would be afraid of doing that. But would the Syrian Liberation Army, supported by Hillary Clinton, backed by the United States government, financed by the United States government, trained by, it's all CIA stuff. That is a CIA operation. And even in the CIA, they're angry about it. And that's where I just do disagree with this one gentleman here about this idea that the CIA is monolithic and the intelligence community is marching lockstep. That's not true. They're not. The people who I know are very worried that we're allowing Israel to push us off the cliff. And they're even willing to say it now. And again, I know that a lot of you guys don't want to hear that. Even now, even among the liberal community, you don't want to hear it. But at some point, you're going to have to face it. So, anyway.
Well, I mean, I like to think that if, not only that Al Gore really did win the election, but that if he had become president, that we would not have had 9/11. And he would not have taken us into war with Iraq and Afghanistan.
But we also had Joe Lieberman, who did. But I don't think that he would have had a 9/11. I think that's true. That I'll give you.
I mean, here you were getting all this intelligence about 9/11, and who were you getting intelligence from? Where was it coming from? It wasn't coming from Iraq.
It was coming from us.
It was coming from us, because
That's right.
who did 9/11? That is my question.
That's
because
right.
I bet you know.
Well, here's the
was
thing.
Blackwater involved?
Yeah. Well, listen. Here's the thing. What the Iraqis' response was always all through the summer is, Susan, we've been checking out this story about this terrorist conspiracy you keep talking about. All of the chatter about this terrorism conspiracy originates with you. You are the source of all this information but the thing is that at some point it became like a lot of chatter. Everybody knew. It was like, the Germans knew, the Israelis knew, all these people, the Egyptians knew,
And
everybody knew. The Taliban knew, everybody knew.
I mean, there are levels of Al-Qaeda. There is the upper echelon level. Now, maybe they're part of the CIA. Like you said, okay, you've got real jihadis, and they're part of Al-Qaeda. But they're the patsies that might have been thrown at the plane.
Exactly.
In the plane.
Three of the 20 might have been authentic, but they were recruited, trained, they're skilled, they were financed, they were put into position, they were given all the help that they could possibly get. They could not have done this all by themselves. No, there's no way.
They didn't have nanothermite.
They didn't have and somebody went in and wired the buildings. And that was us.
In the towers.
Yeah, we will. At this stage, we will never know the names of the individuals who did it. We do know that we do know that on the nights of August 22nd or August 23rd, every night for the next 10 nights until about September 2nd or September 3rd, strange, mysterious truck vans were captured on the parking security garage videotapes at the World Trade Center. They were captured arriving at about 3 o'clock in the morning after the janitorial trucks had left the building. These strange trucks were arriving, and there were about 3 to 4 of them, my friend said, who's an impeccable source, and he said that they came every night from 3 o'clock in the morning. They were leaving at about 5 o'clock in the morning, right before the AAA personalities on Wall Street were coming to watch the Asian markets. And they were able to trace them through the city. Because at that time of night, nobody was on the roads. So New York had enough cameras. The city had enough cameras. They were watching them move, leaving the towers, and could figure out the roads that they were going and what tunnels they were going out of, and where they were going to into New Jersey, is what he said. They were going to New Jersey. Well, no, they did, but you see.
Yeah, of course they don't.
Yeah, why is this information not given to the 9/11 Commission? What were they doing? Were they putting the last explosives in the buildings? Were they taking out the gold?
Right.
And
but okay, so
And also, yeah.
So, to skip to now, I mean, I don't know if I'm totally naive, but I feel like Obama doesn't really want to go to war with Iran.
I think that's
You know,
true.
And he's being pushed, and he's,
Yes.
you know, they want to make him look weak and all this
Yes.
stuff. I just,
I
so
think
what's
that's
gonna
true.
happen?
I
You
think
know?
that, well, here's the thing that I will say. Obama is more distant from Netanyahu than Romney. Romney is like gung-ho for any war, gung-ho for the military-industrial
exactly.
complex. They're his friends, they're his buddies. And he's going to pump them with as much cash as he can if he wins. And
He's
if
gonna be in the White House, too.
So do you see
Yeah,
like an
he may.
October surprise happening, which is a false flag that, you know,
my
Mossad is gonna
internal
do
sources at the CIA are and they're not friends anymore, but they know that I talk and I make a lot of noise, and so they tell me things, and they're aggressively concerned that we should expect several false flag operations, whether it's in October or November, December, January. Until they expect that until the United States, unless the United States puts its foot down and says, under no circumstances, no, we refuse. We're going to fight you. We're not so stupid. And that's one of the reasons my friends have been saying, my contacts have been saying, that I should speak up about 9/11 even now, because they think that Americans are just so. Our stupidity has cost us a lot. It's hurting us to be ignorant. And even if you're not really interested in 9/11 because you're afraid, oh, I don't want to be a 9/11 truther. You know, the facts are ignorance hurts you. It's very easy to manipulate you if you don't know the history of manipulation. But if you are smart enough to say, yeah, they did this before, didn't they? We're not going to fall for it again.
Yeah.
Then you can catch them, and we're not so easy to drive off the cliff,
Yeah.
which is
But
where we're going if we
I
don't
mean-
stop.
I would think they would rather have Romney in the White House, just like
Yes.
they wanted George Bush in the White House and made damn sure that he got there.
That's
You
right.
know, through election manipulation and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, they're either going to completely manipulate the election, which they've been trying.
Do you know that an Israeli corporation is going to count the votes?
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
There you go.
Yeah.
oh my
I
God.
don't know the name of the corporation, but that's who it is. Yeah,
So
it's
not
Israeli
Diebold.
corporation. No. They may use Diebold machines, but they're going to be the election returns are going to be certified by an Israeli corporation. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah. And that's been something that's been talked about in Washington. It's like raising eyebrows, but it's
That's how he's getting into the White House.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
so all they have to do is make Romney look good enough that he could have won the election, that it was feasible that he.
yeah.
So when they throw the election,
Without the Supreme Court.
Without the
so
Supreme
it's-
Court. Well, but the Supreme Court is like, yeah. But Obama, I do believe that Obama is less likely to go to war with Iran. I think that if we, and that's another reason why you've got to vote. You can't stay home. I know a lot of people want to stay home, but you can't stay home. Either way, you gotta vote. Even if you're unenthusiastic. No, I hear people saying no. You have to vote. Sorry.
So, I was just watching Charlie Rose last night, and there was a PhD computer scientist who was saying she doesn't believe that. I said I was just watching Charlie Rose last night, and he was interviewing a PhD computer scientist who said that she does not believe in many states that that it's possible to have a fair counted election because of the machines and the inaccuracy and the ability to be able to break into them. And she was talking about a story in California where they had the team who was designed to go out there and figure out how to break into all of these things, and they could break into them every single time. A little scary.
And also the heat. Sorry, one other thing, heat. Apparently, like if they're overused, like if too many people are voting and they're stressing out the system, then it'll throw it by a tiny margin of error. And there'll be like, the votes won't be exactly right. If there's like 1 million votes, it's more stress than the machines can take, apparently. And then they're off by a few, but only by a few hundred or a couple thousand.
So you were just talking a little while ago about this most recent covert operation with the Syrian Liberation Army and all of that. Over the last probably half a dozen years, there's been a lot of stuff written and a lot of talk about the changing CIA and how the covert ops were going to be pushed out because of the new push to be more of an intelligence gathering agency as opposed to doing covert operations, and that there was a real struggle between those forces. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
There's a big push to whether they should do electronic surveillance and whether they should stick to evaluating electronic surveillance. Here's the funny thing. They're collecting more information than they can possibly process. So it's like it's like dummy, it's worthless. It's like if you've got information overload, you can't use it for anything. So they're talking about having more analysts look at that, as opposed to like actively getting involved in the field. But I think that really it doesn't take too many teams to create a lot of problems in the field. They can do, like right now, the Arab Spring, and I know a lot of people here will not want to hear this. The Arab Spring has been largely financed by the CIA, and people don't want to hear that, but it is true. And they're teaching them how to use social media for propaganda purposes. They're financing them. They're providing weapons for them. They're providing training and teaching them how to use the weapons, and providing strategy techniques.
I think it's admirable that you're sending the message that everyone needs to vote to make sure that
and
we
speak
have
and write.
Right, all of those things. Unfortunately, I think that strategy used to work. It is not working anymore. It is not working because we do not have an honest vote. Yeah. Period. And it is a message that needs to get out because we have voters who are disenfranchised. They are not out there. They're not participating in the ability to work with elections is what they're supposed to be doing. My husband and I have been working and investigating, the machines, the electronic voting machines, for about 2.5 years. Yeah. And there is so much evidence out there that they are rigged. In New Hampshire,
they're flaws. They're definitely flawed. Absolutely.
Oh, well, I mean, you used to be able to get a legislator out, your representatives out, if they didn't uphold the Constitution, you could vote them out. That's not happening anymore. One of the solutions and one of the things that we have to do, it's a positive thing, is to do something about your connection with your voting system. You have to, if your Constitution, our Constitution in New Hampshire says we have the right to an open and observable vote count. We're not getting that. Machines are a concealed count, and they're a computer.
Where I live in Maryland, there is a special type of, we actually have a new advanced system where you can cast your vote at the ballot box, and then you can go, you get a little ticket, and you can go online and see your vote to make sure that it was counted correctly.
No good, no good.
Isn't that
Oh, you don't think that's good?
No, the vote must be counted in full public view of all the citizens. There's no reason to make that count secret.
Yeah,
it's our right. Our Constitution gives it to us.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I hate the voting machines. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I don't know how to fix it, but
hand counting.
Hand counting.
And I have
hand
some,
counting. I support. That's absolutely true. Yes.
I just have a resource list. It's numerous online websites that can give you evidence evidence of the problems with the machines and what you might be able to do with them, and I would be glad to hand one to anyone.
But I would support your hand. We have a problem. We definitely do. Yeah.
But 47% won't vote anyway.
Well, they don't vote because they are not encouraged to. They don't want them to vote.
Yeah, they don't want them to vote. They don't want us to participate. So
Right, exactly.
anyway, all of you, thank you so much for coming. Are there more questions? Thank you.